prince stood at the edge of a sacred waterfall, watching a woman emerge from the mist like she had been carved from moonlight itself. And in that single moment, his kingdom's fate shifted forever. Long before colonial borders carved up the continent, before the name of any modern nation existed, there lived a prince whose greatest weakness was believing himself immune to consequence simply because he wore royal blood. His name was Chukwuemeka, which means God has done well, though by the end of this tale you will wonder if the gods were testing him or mocking him. The elders of his father's kingdom warned every young royal the same thing: never make promises to spirits you cannot keep, and never marry a woman whose family you have never met. Stay until the end, because what happened to this prince still teaches kings and commoners alike why some traditions exist not to limit us, but to protect us from our own arrogance. Here is what nobody understood about the waterfall where Chukwuemeka first saw her. It was not merely water tumbling over stone. It was a doorway between worlds, a place where the river goddess idly held court, choosing mortals to bless or destroy depending on what lived inside their hearts. Some said she rewarded humility. Others whispered she punished pride disguised as devotion. Nobody knew which until it was far too late to turn back. And on that fateful evening, Chukwuemeka was about to discover exactly what kind of man he truly was. Welcome to Folktales, where African stories come alive and every tale teaches the heart. Before we begin, join the family. Tap subscribe. The kingdom of Umana stretched across fertile valleys where the soil grew yams thick as a man's thigh, and palm trees heavy with wine that flowed sweeter than honey. It was a prosperous land ruled by King Nri, a man whose wisdom had brought peace through 3 generations. His son, Prince Chukwuemeka, was everything a kingdom could hope for in an heir. Tall and strong, educated by the finest diviners, trained in warfare by the most skilled warriors, and blessed with a voice that commanded attention whenever he spoke. But like many princes raised inside palace walls, he had never truly known hardship, never faced consequences that his father's power could not soften. While other young men his age struggled to feed families or clear farmland under brutal sun, Chukwuemeka's greatest challenge was choosing which festival to attend or which visiting dignitary's daughter to entertain with carefully rehearsed poetry. The elders watched him carefully, whispering among themselves that a man who has never tasted failure rarely understands the weight of responsibility. His father heard these whispers but dismissed them, believing time and kingship would season his son properly. Time, however, had other lessons planned. As Chukwuemeka approached the age when princes must marry, suitors arrived from every neighboring kingdom. Daughters of chiefs, nieces of wealthy traders, women whose families could strengthen alliances or expand trade routes. The palace courtyard filled weekly with nervous fathers presenting their daughters like precious goods at market. Chukwuemeka received them all with polite disinterest. None moved him. None stirred anything deeper than mild curiosity. "You are too particular," his father warned one evening after Chukwuemeka had dismissed yet another perfectly suitable match. "A king does not marry for passion alone, he marries for the kingdom's future." "Then let the kingdom wait," Chukwuemeka replied with the careless confidence of someone who had never been denied anything important, "until I find a woman worthy of becoming queen." His father's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. Kings learn patience even with stubborn sons. What the prince did not say aloud, even to himself, was that he secretly believed himself destined for something extraordinary, some bride whose beauty and grace would make every other kingdom envious. Pride, when it lives quietly inside a man's chest, grows dangerous roots. One afternoon, restless and bored with palace routine, Chukwuemeka went hunting alone despite his father's standing rule that royals must always travel with guards. He followed a bush path deep into the forest, chasing an antelope that seemed always just beyond arrow's reach, until he found himself in territory he did not recognize. The trees grew thicker here, older, their roots twisting across the ground like the fingers of buried giants. Bird calls sounded strange and distant. Even the sunlight seemed different, filtered through leaves into something greenish and dreamlike. Then he heard it. The sound of falling water, distant but unmistakable, calling to him like drums summoning warriors to assembly. He followed the sound until the forest opened suddenly onto a sight that stole his breath completely. A waterfall, massive and white, tumbling down black rock into a pool so clear he could see smooth stones resting on the bottom. Mist rose like smoke, catching afternoon light and turning it into rainbows that danced across the water's surface. It was the most beautiful place he had ever seen. And standing at the pool's edge, as if she had simply materialized from the mist itself, was a woman. She wore white cloth that clung to her like a second skin, and her skin seemed to glow faintly even in shadow. Her hair was braided with cowries and river stones. When she turned toward him, her eyes held something ancient, something that made Chukwumeka's princely confidence falter for just a heartbeat. "You have wandered far from your father's palace, Chukwumeka," she said, her voice carrying easily over the waterfall's roar. He froze. "How do you know who I am?" "I know many things," she said, smiling in a way that was neither warm nor cold, simply knowing. "I know you are searching for something worthy of a prince's heart." Despite every instinct screaming caution, Chukwumeka found himself stepping closer. "What is your name?" "Ifoma," she said. "It means beautiful thing." "Your parents named you well," he said, his practiced charm returning. "Where is your village, your family?" "My family is old," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the waterfall, "older than your kingdom, and my home is here where the water meets the earth." Something about her answer felt incomplete, but her beauty scattered his questions like wind scattering leaves. They spoke until the sun began its descent, and Chukwumeka found himself more captivated than he had ever been by any woman in his father's court. She spoke of things no village girl should know, ancient stories, the movements of stars, the true names of rivers. When darkness began gathering between the trees, she finally said, "You should return home, Prince, your father will worry." "I will come back tomorrow," he said quickly. "Will I find you here?" she smiled. "If the water permits it." He returned the next day and the next and the next after that. Each visit, Ifoma revealed just enough of herself to deepen his fascination while keeping her true nature carefully hidden. She never ate when he brought food. She never seemed cold even when evening winds turned sharp. And she never, not once, agreed to visit his kingdom or meet his family. "Why do you refuse?" he finally asked after the 7th visit. "Are you ashamed of me?" "I am bound to this place," she said simply. "If you want me, you must accept me as I am here where the water knows me." Pride and desire tangled inside Chukwumeka's chest until they became indistinguishable from love. Within a moon's cycle, he had convinced himself that this mysterious woman was exactly the extraordinary bride he had been destined to find. He returned to the palace and announced to his father that he had chosen his queen. "Who is she?" the king asked. "Where is her family? What kingdom does she come from?" "She comes from the forest," Chukwumeka said, "near the sacred waterfall. Her name is Ifoma." Every elder in the council chamber went silent. The king's face darkened. "You went to the forbidden waterfall." "It is not forbidden," Chukwumeka protested. "Only the elders avoid it because of old superstitions." "Those superstitions," the oldest diviner said quietly, "exist because that waterfall belongs to Idmali, the river goddess. Any woman you met there is not what she appears to be." "She is real," Chukwumeka insisted. "I have spoken with her many times." "Then bring her here," his father commanded. "Let us meet her family properly. Let the diviners examine her intentions. If she is truly mortal and suitable, we will prepare a proper marriage." But when Chukwumeka returned to the waterfall and relayed his father's demand, Ifoma's expression shifted into something colder. "Your father does not trust what he cannot control," she said. "If you truly want me as your wife, you must marry me here by the water under the old laws that existed before kings built palaces." "My father will never accept that," Chukwumeka said. "Then you must choose," Ifoma said softly, "between his approval and your own heart." Every wise voice inside him screamed caution, but desire, stubbornness, and pride formed a rope stronger than reason. That very night, beneath a full moon with only the waterfall as witness, Chukwumeka spoke the marriage vows taught to him by the palace priests, and Ifoma responded with words in a language older than any he recognized. When it was finished, she smiled and touched his wrist, and he felt something shift inside him, like a door closing that he had not known was open. "Now you belong to the water," she said, "and I belong to you." He laughed nervously. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, her smile never wavering, "that you must honor me above all others, never question my nature, and never reveal to anyone what I truly am." "And what are you truly?" he asked, though part of him already knew. "Your wife," she said simply, and the waterfall's roar swallowed any further questions. When Chukwumeka returned to the palace with Ifoma at his side, the kingdom erupted into confused celebration. She was breathtaking, graceful, and spoke with a refinement that impressed even the most skeptical nobles. But the elders watched her carefully, noting how she never ate in public, how her skin seemed faintly luminescent in certain light, how small animals grew nervous in her presence. The king, bound by his son's public declaration, permitted the marriage but insisted on a proper ceremony. Throughout the elaborate 7-day festival, Ifoma smiled and played her role perfectly, though she disappeared each night, claiming rituals that required solitude. Chukwumeka, blinded by pride in his beautiful wife, ignored the worried glances exchanged between his father and the diviners. The troubles began subtly. The palace wells, which had never run dry, began producing water that tasted strange, faintly of river mud. Crops in the royal fields grew oddly, some sections flourishing while others withered for no reason the farmers could explain. Servants reported hearing water running through the palace walls at night, though no pipes existed there. Then came the restrictions. Ifoma informed Chukwuemeka that he must never enter her chambers uninvited, never question where she went at night, and never allow his mother or sisters to visit her without permission. "Why?" he asked. "Because I am your wife," she said, "and a wife deserves privacy and respect." It sounded reasonable, but each restriction added another invisible chain. Months passed. The kingdom's unease grew as strange events multiplied. Fish in the royal pond died overnight. A visiting chief's daughter drowned in water barely deep enough to cover her ankles. During important ceremonies, sudden rainstorms appeared from cloudless skies, drenching guests and ruining festivals. The elders finally approached the king directly. "Your son has married a spirit," the head diviner said. "She is Idmali's daughter, and she is slowly claiming this kingdom through him." "What can be done?" the king asked, his voice heavy with dread. "He must renounce her," the diviner said, "before the river claims him completely." But when the king confronted Chukwuemeka, the prince refused absolutely. "She is my wife. I will not abandon her because of superstitious fear." "This is not superstition," his father said. "Open your eyes, my son. Look at what is happening." "I see a kingdom that cannot accept a woman who does not come from royal blood," Chukwuemeka shot back, his pride now fully armored against reason. That night Ifoma came to him with tears streaming down her face. "Your family wants to destroy our marriage," she said. "They will invent any lie to separate us." "I will never let that happen," he promised, holding her close, feeling her skin cool as river stone against his chest. "Good," she whispered, "because if you ever betray me, the water will reclaim everything it has touched, including you." The warning should have terrified him. Instead, it only deepened his stubborn determination to prove everyone wrong. The crisis arrived during the dry season. The kingdom's rivers, which should have been low but manageable, began flooding violently despite the lack of rain. Fields drowned, compounds flooded, people died. The diviners performed every ritual they knew, but the water continued rising, ignoring all spiritual intervention. Finally, the oldest diviner entered the palace throne room and spoke the truth everyone had been avoiding. "The river goddess is angry because the prince married her daughter without proper respect, without acknowledging her true nature, without offering the required sacrifices. She is punishing the entire kingdom for his arrogance." Chukwuemeka, forced to witness his people's suffering, finally felt the first cracks in his certainty. That night he confronted Ifoma directly. "Tell me the truth. Are you the river goddess's daughter?" She studied him for a long moment, then smiled sadly. "Yes." "Why did you not tell me? Would you have married me if I had?" she asked. "Would your pride have allowed you to admit you loved something beyond your understanding or control?" The words struck him like a physical blow because they were entirely true. He had wanted an extraordinary bride to prove his own extraordinariness, but he had never truly considered what that might cost. "What must I do to stop the flooding?" he asked. "Acknowledge what I am," she said, publicly. "Build a shrine to my mother at the waterfall, offer proper sacrifices, honor the old agreements between your kingdom and the river." "And if I do this, will you stay?" She touched his face gently. "I was never meant to stay forever, Chukwuemeka. I was sent to teach you that some powers cannot be controlled, only respected. You married me to prove yourself exceptional, but you never asked what I needed or wanted. That is not love, that is pride wearing love's mask." Tears filled his eyes as understanding finally arrived. "I have been a fool." "Yes," she said kindly, "but a fool who can still learn." The next morning, before the entire kingdom, Prince Chukwuemeka confessed everything. He acknowledged his wife's true nature, his own arrogance, and begged forgiveness from both his people and the river goddess. He ordered the shrine built and performed the sacrifices himself, humbled and weeping. The flood stopped that very day. Ifoma appeared one final time at the waterfall, beautiful and terrible, no longer pretending to be simply mortal. "You have learned," she said. "Rule well, Chukwuemeka, rule with humility." Then the water claimed her and she was gone. Chukwuemeka never remarried. He ruled after his father with a wisdom born from devastating loss, and his kingdom prospered under a king who had finally learned that true strength lies not in controlling everything, but in respecting what cannot be controlled. This story carries ancient truth. First, pride disguised as love leads only to destruction. Second, some boundaries exist not to limit us, but to protect us from powers beyond our understanding. Third, wisdom often arrives only after we have paid a terrible price for ignoring it. And finally, the greatest leaders are those who have learned humility through their own failures. Thank you for listening. If this moved you, like, share, and subscribe for more African folklore. Until next time, respect what you cannot control, and never mistake pride for love.